Percent of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not. It
Gets the people going.
You're now listening to Diagnonsense.
Look at all this damage!
With Justin Pendergrass and Kurt Hoenack.
You are a sad, strange little man.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
Yeah, just hit record and we'll just dive in.
No, we're already recording.
Oh,
we are? Yeah.
Isaac, way ahead of the game, bro.
I'm
Kurt,
on top
dude,
of it
how are
today.
you doing today, man? I wanted to ask you that.
Okay.
How's today going, dude?
Yeah, no, it's going good so far. Back on coffee, which I
dang.
struggle with being on and off coffee. But
Yeah, dude.
You know, we have
a problem.
addiction specialists here.
Yeah.
To help you with that.
That's true. I'll tell you what. Actually, I have to train myself to only have 1 cup of coffee a day, so I get the largest one I can.
Yep.
I don't know if that's actually doing anything for you then.
It's better for you, actually, you know? And also, the more sugar in it, the better. It keeps you just going. Thank you guys for tuning in to Diagnonsense. I'm your host, Justin Pendergrass, and I'm here with my co-host, Kurt Hoenack. How you doing, Kurt?
Doing great.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Today we're going to ask that question that everybody's wondering.
Okay.
Right? Have you met Kurt Hoenack?
What's the deal with Kurt Hoenack?
Yeah. Have you met him? So, Isaac, this is a funny story about it is that when Kurt and I first started hanging out, we would be in public and I would just ask people, random people, hey, have you met Kurt Hoenack? As like the wingman, just introducing him to people. And I did it to so many people that I would actually go back around the room and introduce them to the same people I already had. Ask you, hey, have you met Kurt Hoenack? This is Kurt.
It was great for my self-esteem.
Yeah, it really boosted him up.
Yeah, I met Kurt 10 minutes ago when you introduced him to me the first time.
Yeah,
got
really?
it.
You didn't meet him last week?
No.
He was just in this room,
He's
just a void.
blending into the background.
All right.
Kurt, how are you doing, man? Today what are we gonna talk about today, man?
Well, we're going to talk about me, I guess. That's pretty...
Ooh.
That's
Bring it up.
Intimidating.
That's intimidating. That is true. Well, let's just dive in then, man. Where were you born? Where are you from?
I'm from Anchorage. I was born in Anchorage. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, that explains everything. No,
Dang.
I was there for about 11
Conversation
years.
over.
Yeah, conversation over.
Boo! Throw a tomato.
Yeah. No, but I was there for about 11 years, and then we moved out to the valley.
Okay, you made a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your parents are like, we love our children. We
Yep.
want to move to the valley.
Yeah.
I hope Anchorage is listening and super offended.
No, it was just like smaller town, I think, and from their perspective, and
Yeah.
you know,
So when you guys moved out to the valley, where did you guys stay? Did you guys stay? Which part of the valley did you move to?
we stayed in Palmer, and then we moved to, we stayed in Wasilla, and then moved to. We had a house being built in Palmer.
Okay. You know where that was at? Like which?
Yeah, it was in the Hay Flats.
Oh, you guys just.
I mean, I lived there. So
Yeah. No,
where
I
it's
mean.
You lived in the hay flats?
Dang,
Yeah,
dude.
Like
yeah.
a swamp
rolled
creature?
around with
Yeah.
the cows. Yeah.
That also
No.
that sounds like Anchorage. No,
Yeah.
just
No.
just bring it back.
Uh-oh.
So, just you then? Do you have family? What's going on?
Yeah, with my sister, her. She's case manager.
Oh, that's right,
here.
I do know
Yeah,
her.
You do know her. You have
I'm
the
trying to
good
ask you questions so that other people think that we don't know each other because I haven't met
That's
Kurt
true.
Hoenack.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, with my mom and dad and I don't know. Palmer, it's like I don't know because Palmer, I almost died in Palmer, I feel
Yeah.
like. So you know what I mean?
You and everybody else.
You and everybody else. So
We're going to
so,
have
no, it was
Palmer come into this
I
studio
know,
and beat
Palmer's-
us all up.
Palmer's
Yeah, this
gonna
is the second
mob
episode
us.
in a row that we're just like
It's
ripping
gonna-
on Palmer.
Palmer's gonna
Look,
get us.
Kurt and I don't have a problem with Palmer as like a whole.
Yeah. We just had a lot of trauma there. that's
Yeah,
all.
it's like Palmer. We can connect to the traumas that were created in Palmer, right?
Right.
When I
Well,
moved to Mosilla, my life got better. You know?
Man, that's the first time that statement's ever been uttered by anyone, I
it's
think.
the first time in history. That's historical.
Well, we're making history. That's
Yeah.
true.
No,
So you moved to Palmer. You
Yeah.
guys lived in Palmer for how long before?
Well, we rented, and while the house was being built, and
Okay.
then the house was built, and then, I want to say there's a lot going on, I mean, I was, part of the reason I had such a hard time was that, at the time I had been going through, let me think, it's probably around, 2006, 2008 that I really, I got really sick when we were living in Palmer.
Okay.
Like we had moved out to the valley and, I was, by then I had been like, I want to say I'd been, taking different meds and stuff because I was diagnosed with all this stuff, depression, anxiety, all that.
Mm.
And in that time frame, like when we moved into that house, I just, like it wasn't getting better. And then I got hooked to Ritalin too, which was sucky.
Oh, wow. So wait, so when you said you were prescribed a bunch of meds,
Yeah.
they so you moved to Palmer, you're having a little bit of a hard time, you're starting to like feel these heavy emotions. Am I following?
Well, it was something like I had been struggling for a long time before then, right? So like when I was
back up and talk about that. Let's start there.
Yeah, let's start there. So like as early as 5, right? My teachers were like, this guy's got ADD, ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom was like, she was worried about that. And I ended up, by the time I was 8, I've always had a hard time with the winters here because I think everybody does a little bit.
That's a seasonal depression,
Yeah.
lack of that vitamin D from the sun.
But by the time I was 8, like during the wintertime, I was just crying and just having anxiety and like just miserable. So I think my mom, was like instinctively was like, there's something wrong. So like,
Right, my boy is hurting. I don't,
Right.
Yeah.
so like I ended up, that's when I first got on Prozac. And I think that, we didn't want to do the ADD, ADHD thing at first, but then like a few years passed and I was still not doing great, but we ended up, doing like, I went to Adderall.
So you started, the first diagnosis that they try to slap on you was ADHD, which, being a young man,
Right.
like a little boy, like to me, that blows my mind because as a young man, it's like we're wild children and we get misdiagnosed in ADHD a lot because of the fact that we're boys. And, and I'm not, some people need it, right? I'm a different perspective than you, but a lot of the time we diagnose young men, in our situation, because I almost got diagnosed with ADHD when I was really young. But my mom was like, no, he's a little boy. Like,
You can
he's
make an
just
argument for most kids that age, like having some level of ADHD.
Right.
But
Right. It's their brains are developing and they're going like this. And there's so much stimulation going on all the time from electronics and everything that's going on. Like we were in the culture, like we grew up in that like huge boom of the electronic push. Like cell phones started becoming a thing. The internet became huge. Like video games are constantly at home. Like almost, we had so much overstimulation in our minds. Of course, our minds are going crazy, like especially as young boys.
Right.
So you, when they came to you, they were like, hey, I think that this young man has some ADHD.
Right. Well, it was a teacher too. So, it wasn't even somebody who was coming at, I think, from my parents from a medical perspective or a, but
So did they shove that off to the side and be like, no,
yeah,
not him?
kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they were like, they weren't super sold on the idea that you had a medical condition of ADHD.
I want to say they weren't sold on it, but they were sold. They were convinced there was something, right?
That you need to get checked out.
Yeah,
So then
yeah.
you go to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Or not the hospital. You go to a primary care doctor and start having a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens after that then? Like let's go there.
Well, so ended up, I can't even remember if the referral came from a general practitioner or I went to a psychiatrist first. We were kind of looking at it like, oh, it's in the family because I had an uncle who struggled with some mental health stuff and was diagnosed bipolar and stuff like that. And so, we were kind of coming at it from the perspective of like, oh, it's in the genetics kind of thing,
Yeah, and that's pretty common practice for those in the healthcare, mental health field
Right.
is to look at the family history and be like, hey, this person possibly could have this because grandpa had it, or, you know,
Right.
uncle, you know. Okay. So from there, they started doing these, let's call them tests, to figure out what's going on with Kurt Hoenack, right?
Right.
Like, what's going on with my son? What's going on with this boy? Because there's some stuff that, like, there was, you said, there's suicidal ideation.
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was some heavy emotions and feelings. And from your parents' perspective, they kind of came out of nowhere, right?
Right.
So they don't understand what's going on. You don't necessarily understand what's going on. You're just being told what's wrong, and they're accepting that as facts.
Yeah.
Cool. So then for the next, how long did that take? How long were you kind of like tested on?
Well,
how long were you a lab rat, Kurt?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to ask, like, does that stop when you, because like the last time I was on something, I think I was 24, 25.
It was when you started the
24
taper.
is when I was off completely.
You tapered off?
But I had been tapering off
Okay.
at that point. But so for that entire time from 8 to 24, so that was, I had suspected earlier, right, that wasn't the whole story. But like from 8 to 24, so that's what,
16 years.
16 years, yeah.
Wow. 16 years of, and so periods of time you were on medications for longer periods for some and shorter periods for others. And
Right.
as they were testing and figuring out really what was going to work for your system and what wasn't.
Right.
And you said, 16 years
Right.
of, you
So-
know, how many different medications
so-
did they throw you on?
Right. So that looks like about 23 different drugs over the course
Wow.
of 16 years. With I think from what I've got in my medical records, that's about 93 different adjustments to medication in that course of that.
And how
time.
often did they, like, was there ever a conversation about tapering, or were they like, hey, you need to take these forever?
There were, the kind of the consensus was that I have a mental illness from a disease, and that, that was it was a disease pathology kind of thing. Like, it wasn't something that I was going to be able to, not take medication for. You know what
For
I
the
mean?
rest of your life?
Yeah.
So, I have depression. Like, I know that, without being diagnosed, right? I'm not trying to misdiagnose myself. I'm not trying to diagnose myself without, a doctor, but I do know that I have depression. It's
Yeah.
pretty severe sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. So when I started the conversation for meds, which, terrified me.
Yeah.
Right. Only because of the experiences that people that I know in my life and loved ones have had.
Right.
That it just became something that they became reliant on.
Yeah.
My drug of choice was pills, so the fact that I would have to take a pill every day scared the living crap out of me, right?
Right.
So when my doctor was like, hey, this will be a 6 months process. You start with a smaller dose, you wean up, and then you wean down. And at 6 months, and we slowly taper you and see how your mind's going, right? So that's my understanding of medications and what they're supposed to be used as. But it doesn't sound like they did that for you. It sounds like they were like, hey, Kurt, this is a forever thing. What were your diagnoses, and why were they saying that?
Well, I think we went from, when I look back on it, and it's weird, right? Because the DSM changes, and I think the diagnostic codes may have changed in that time span. And I mean, when I look back on it, I think there was at least 8 different diagnoses that I went through, mostly bipolar and depression and anxiety.
So
Most of those categories.
do you know if it was type 1 or type 2?
I know. I want to say that it was. I wish I would have brought it with me now, because I've got.
We don't have to know the general specifics, and we can go more into that as we grow and
Right.
we learn about each other,
Right.
and we share with others. But I was only asking because that those are two different really extremes of the bipolar spectrum.
I mean, when I look at the information about how these are defined, I'd have to look at that more to specifically point out. But to me, in hindsight, right, is the bipolar that I understood that I was diagnosed with and what I think bipolar is now from the outside looking in is two different things, right? Like,
Sure. So 16 years of that, and off and on, kind of feeling a little poked and prodded and just not really, like you were being fully understood, right? Is that fair?
yeah, I mean, that's fair.
When did that feeling start, though? Because it wasn't at first. At first, you were just believing what was told to you, right? You were feeling like, hey, this is facts. Like, this is helping me. And then at what point in your life did you start to feel like, hey, this isn't actually helping me and I need something different?
Well, it was kind of a process of disillusionment. And I think the first step in that process was, around 15, 16, getting hooked to Ritalin and understanding that this is a whole different demon than what I thought I was dealing with. And then getting so sick from trying to, I tried to withdraw several times in that process I was put on, between mood stabilizers, antidepressants, and in that process, I tried to withdraw several times. So that was another step. The next thing was probably like, when I met Michelle Overstreet at Burchell High School as a life coach, she was suggesting, let's do some holistic type stuff, like get you into gym class, getting you eating the right foods. That was another layer of the disillusionment.
So you started to eat healthier and try to exercise your body and your mind, right?
And that made a difference. And that was never really a conversation that was being had, that I needed to take care of myself in those ways, or that would help with my depression. Kind of the conversation was, okay, this is a chemical imbalance. You treat chemical imbalance with chemicals. And there was never really this like approach of like, there's
There's healthier
that I need
approaches,
to look at.
yeah. Do you believe that? And I'm playing devil's advocate with you real quick, just because I like to.
Go ahead.
Right.
Shoot.
This is where our conversations get good. So, do you believe that every person who is prescribed a medication like that should be trying these things first?
Well, so I think that because medicine is so individual, I think that medicine should be more individualized, just from what I've learned, right, since this whole I started this whole journey, and that medicine should be more individualized, and that there's certain scenarios where like, yeah, maybe that's the first approach that somebody has,
Like schizophrenia or like a manic episode?
well, and not even necessarily those, right? I think it's highly contextualized around the person, right? Like because it depends on how you define medications. If you define that as a chemical that goes into your body and then leaves your body and doesn't have any kind of long-term implications, then sure, that might be a first approach. But like with my experience, what I went through, that, and what I know now about how, medications can change your body in the long term, I don't see it that way.
So, again, devil's advocate. So you do believe that medications are okay for short-term use to stabilize, and then there should be other options made? Or do you think that there should be the other options first and then medications if necessary?
Well, I think it's highly contextualized, right? Like, so if you have, and this is just theory, right? This isn't like, I'm not giving medical advice or telling anybody what to do. But from what I see of like when we prescribe something like an antipsychotic, is that, okay, you're prescribing something that inhibits the transmission of dopamine in the brain. Okay, why would you do that unless somebody's having a psychosis that's totally contingent on an over influx of dopamine, first? And second, because we know that the efficacy of antipsychotics has changed from like just being something that you take for psychosis to something that in the long term, it doesn't look so good. It isn't like the 1960s maybe view of things where I think the thinking was maybe you could just put a drug in there and it would come out of the system, and you didn't have like a long-term effect from that. But to me, reading the literature, that's not what it says.
Well,
Okay.
so I'm listening to a series about MK Ultra right now, and in the 1960s, like, you want to talk about personalized medications and personalized health plans. They didn't even have, you know, the distinctions of bipolar disorder, like mania. It was all just, you're a schizophrenic, and we're either going to drug you into oblivion, or like, hey, you're a schizophrenic. Let's like these were experiments that were conducted by quote unquote medical professionals back in the 1960s and 70s. That they used to take football helmets that had speakers wired into the football helmets, and they would just play on a loop stuff like, why are you behaving like this? Is it because you hate your mother? Why are you behaving like this? Is it because you hate your mother?
That
And they would
sounds like
drive
a
these
Batman.
people.
That sounds like
it
something
sounds
out of
like something
Batman.
out of James Bond.
Yeah, or like, you know, the Riddler just captured this guy, or the Joker, and just played that stuff for them in his little fun house.
Yeah. No,
You know?
like, I mean, this has been, like, now with, like, all these, like, different medications and stuff, like, we can, you know, we've made progress scientifically,
yeah.
but, like, it feels like the treatment method
Well,
is not changed.
in the problem, what you're getting to the root of the problem, and why I'm having a difficult time trying to distill my view on treatment protocol is because the root of the problem is much more largely systemic and institutional, right?
Yeah.
Like, the problem is much larger scope than just do you think people should have a like medication first approach? Because what you're talking about is, first of all, do medications do what we think they do from like, what cultural perspective are we talking about first? And second, are we considering like the history of the, whatever you're talking about, whether that's psychiatry or cultural approaches to insanity or like that? That's hard for me. It's hard for me to answer that question, because I want to say that, like, it's highly individualized. I think that there are some scenarios like, I read Temple Grandin's book. She has autism, right? And she swears that SSRIs have made a huge impact for her in that book. And I want to say that, like, that's a scenario where somebody has a cognitive issue where, the benefits of introducing a drug that can alter your biology may outweigh the negatives,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
we're not talking about drugs in that context. When we talk about treating psychosis in our culture or depression, we're not talking we're going to I don't want to say permanently alter somebody's biology, but definitely alter their biology in the long term when we introduce them to a drug. We're not talking about from that perspective. And I think when we talked about like suicide prevention, because we talked about you a little bit, we talked about the fact that, things can be catastrophized. And I think it's really easy for somebody to walk in and say, I have depression, or I'm having, psychotic symptoms, and I need a drug, and this is an emergency. And for a doctor to sit there, especially with the budget that,
And check the boxes and
Well-
be like, well, you had 9 out of the 12 things checked, so you
Right.
do have depression.
Well, and with the marketing budget and the budget of we're talking multi-billion-dollar industry here, right?
Sure.
It's easy. That is the easy, approach to. That's the easy
Yeah.
solution. Is that, oh, by the way, none of your nutrition matters. None of exercise doesn't matter. Your culture doesn't matter. Your trauma doesn't matter. It's just basically this chemical isn't just going into your brain. I mean,
Sure.
so it's tough for me, right? But if somebody's used a drug, right, and they have drug, they have what is essentially a post-acute withdrawal that's causing their psychosis because they have biological damage to their body, then that's a more complicated answer, right? Because
Right.
it's like, well, you already have the damage. It is introducing the drug to improve quality of life over the long term
Better than, yeah.
Yeah. So that's hard. That's hard, right? Because even though it may improve quality of life in the short term, from what I'm reading in my experience, is that in the long term, you may have an overall reduction of quality of life, and it's so highly individualized and contingent on what's going on.
Well, I mean, like, so someone that is addicted to opioids, like a big problem with the opioid epidemic now is that heroin use is on the rise, right? Because it's easier now to get heroin than it is opioids for some of these people. So does introducing because they already have the biological need for that drug, is introducing them to heroin like better for their short-term or long-term stability? Like obviously not, right? But I mean,
well, at that point, you're dealing with what is the existential. If you extrapolate that out, what is the what is the existential end game culturally? Because if we have a culture where everybody's using an opioid substance, because it just proliferates and becomes so widely widely used and sort of like accepted as normalized, the addiction becomes so normalized that, we don't really see it as an issue culturally. Then what you have is you're playing you're playing basically a long game between the collapse of your culture, I think, because of because that's not I don't know, I grew up around addiction. I don't think it's sustainable to have large amounts of people on opioid type substances. And I think that is also, that also speaks to like, what are we not solving that we need to use drugs like opioids and psychotropics in such mass quantities where, what pain or what thing is wrong, that has to be the solution for us at, like, in large amounts of people, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And continuing to play devil's advocate. Like, do you wean someone off crack by saying like, well, okay, no crack, but I did get you some cocaine, like snort a few lines, it's close enough, like we'll wean you off, we'll get you onto cocaine, and then we'll wean you off of the cocaine like later, but we'll keep you on a substance. Like,
well, you're looking into something that's much deeper than just.
Right.
Well, I just
but that's kind of
but that's insanity.
No, that's the
right?
conversation,
like
right?
No one is going to suggest like, oh, well, we want you to stop being addicted to crack, so let's get you onto cocaine, and then we can get you off of that later. Like, that seems to be the stopgap solution with a lot of these medications.
It's funny that we're going down this route, kind of, because that was actually
Right.
the next step that I reached, right? Was that, oh, by the way, exercise and nutrition helps. But the next step was I was seeing a counselor, and I had struggled for a long time to find somebody, different people to confide in, because of the level of the intensity of withdrawal, and the things I was dealing with were not things that I could trust every person then talk about, right?
Right, because you needed that humanistic
well,
connection and somebody who wasn't
yeah.
going to catastrophize what you were saying,
Yes.
and build it into this big thing, when really what you're just saying is, this is how I'm feeling, this isn't what I'm going to do,
Right.
kind of situation. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I've heard you tell me some of those stories before, so
Yeah.
without getting too into detail on that, but go
right.
ahead.
And the thing is, like, and the thing is, and some of those things are real nasty, and some of those things are deep, nasty stuff. Like, talking about the fact that, like, you kind of were literally experimented on, for years with mind altering substances. We consider the mind is considered like a sacred thing, right? Sacrosanct, kind of, and somebody's spirit, somebody's soul, and the idea that so some of those things were super nasty, right?
Yeah.
And I still deal with them, and I have to, do a lot of self-care and things to keep myself healthy. But what I wanted to say is that the next part of that journey, right, was, you know, I was with this counselor and talking to this counselor, and they passed me a copy of Anatomy of an Epidemic, and right, and so that was the next layer of disillusionment was, you know, all these things, all these drugs are not working for me. I went the hard route. I tried 23 different drugs, and then exercise is helping, you know, food's helping. So what's up with this? And, you know, talking to people helps, like confiding in people who can have that humanistic connection helps. And then I get past a copy of Anatomy of an Epidemic, and I read I think it's 350 pages or something. And I read the whole thing and I go, so you're telling me that we've had data for like decades that some of these, like a lot of these drugs in the long term, you know, lead to side effects, but that like some of the efficacy drops off. The efficacy drops off. Long-term like nervous system damage emerges. You know, the things that they were prescribed for get worse in a lot of cases. And like,
well, that's with anything, right? Like, and I'm not trying to say, like, you know, you go and you get your flu shot and everyone's all like, well, I don't take the flu shot because it gets me sick. But that's actually, you know, means your immune system is working. But, you know, with a lot of those substances, you know, one of the underlining things is, it may make your depression worse because of your chemical, like your DNA and what's with you, right?
Well,
and
individualized.
Again, right, individualized, yes.
But
and I'm playing devil's advocate with you because you know that I'm not against meds. I'm not for them, but I'm not against them. I'm on the fence with it because you know, some people, I do believe that it is an individualized thing where, you know, some people may need that for a short term in their life. And what you're saying and what our conversation really is, Curtis, is that you weren't one of the people who needed that. You needed humanistic connection. You needed to exercise more because, I mean, you for lack of like making you feel insecure, but you were a little bigger when you were on medications.
Well, and we could talk about the fact that some of those medications disrupt your metabolism and make it hard to lose weight. And you know,
so that's another thing that, you know, we bring to the table. I want to kind of steer off this conversation about the meds because what we're really here to do is talk about, you know, your where you are now. Right. And this is just there's not really a good transition point into that conversation because this one can go on for another hour. And, and I'm excited to continue to explore this. You and I kind of bump heads a little bit in a good way. On that conversation because I'm on the other side of the fence. As you. So it's a good thing. It's an interesting conversation and I'm really excited to explore that. But really what I want to know is that, you know, you said 24 is when you started to wean off and then what you've done since. What are you, 28, almost 29?
Yep.
So almost 5 years.
Yeah.
You've been off of your antidepressants. How is that going? Like, how do you feel most days? Like, what's working for you? What have you done as a career path? Where are you going?
Right. I mean, I want to say for the first 2 years, I just kind of, there's a whole post-acute withdrawal process, right? I mean,
and that's anywhere between 3 and 8, right?
Well, I mean,
3 and 5.
I mean, depends on, you know, if you look at one of the lay communities that I really like is Inner Compass Initiative, and if you go on their Facebook group, Inner Compass Conversations, there's probably hundreds of people there going through post-acute withdrawal that where, you know, one of the founders of that, Laura Delano, she's got, like, she said she still notices difference 10 years into it, right? Like it's a long game. I mean, I think she was exposed for about 14 years to different things, but, you know, the first 2 years were absolutely hell, but, I do notice little changes every year, right? Like I noticed a little more empathy at 2 years.
You weren't as cynical.
Well, I felt a little more connected.
Okay.
I felt a little more empathetic towards myself and towards other people.
Well, and I think when we met, you were just coming on to about 2 years in, a year and a half.
Yeah.
Year and a half in, you'd come to the cafe at the My House building. You'd sit in the cafe and you'd read and
have a coffee or
Yeah,
tea.
when we
or,
first really started to get to know each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So you'd already. So I met you in. I don't even know, but back when you were running the cafe and you were still on your medications.
Yeah,
then.
I was still on. I think I was on Paxil. Was the last one I tapered off of.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then now you're in this situation where you're no longer on those things.
Right.
Where'd you go from there? So you were in the cafe, but when I came on staff here, you weren't. And that was a direct result of this tapering off, right? Like there was just some things that you needed to work on.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, I got super sick. I got a few different infections, and then developed some food allergies. I had to cook for a year. I had to cook all my food because I was so sensitive to foods.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers, right? And then, so I think about 2.5 years, right? You're saying like, how's I doing since then? 2.5 years into that, I think it was about 2.5 years. I got the thyroid cancer diagnosis, and that was like,
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, that was like a big thing too, because I kind of had, it was like I was battling the post-acute withdrawal.
Well, now you got this badass scar on your neck that you can tattoo a zipper on.
I could like Trevor from Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
with the
do
cut
it, dude.
Here,
Yeah.
the cut here tattoo.
Super sweet. It's a good conversation starter,
It is.
For
the ladies.
Yeah. And I'm like, have you met Kurt Hoenack? He's got a neck scar. So, and they're just like, oh, they just swoon. No, man. And then so from there, you moved on to Fred Meyer's for a little bit. I think you talked about that in our last show that you were in Fred Meyer's for a bit. But now, like, while you were in Fred Meyer's, you started going to school. You were in college.
Yeah.
For human services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was mixed up for a second. I thought I was going to do computer sciences, and then I took like one class of that and was like, okay, I can't sit here and do because I homeschooled, right? And earlier in my life before I went to high school, and I was tired of sitting at a computer, right? Like I'd sat at a computer for years, right? So.
Was that because of homeschooling, or was that because of World of Warcraft?
Well, it was both at the same time.
It's simultaneously,
it's
the both.
Right. And so, and you know how it is here in the wintertime too. Sometimes it's easier just to sit on your devices, right?
Right. Dude, I'm guilty, and I have to force myself out of my little dungeon. And I call it that. There's no windows in my studio, so
sometimes your device is the only source of light for like the next 16 hours.
Right, and it doesn't give you vitamin D, and then you get these really ugly bags under your eyes because you're just staring at a computer all the time. Yeah, I got them. Yeah. Gotta freeze a spoon and put it on your eye.
Right.
That's what my sisters did. I don't know if it works. I've never tried it. Get a face mask from Target.
Right.
They have male face masks now, Isaac, just so you know.
Do they?
Yep. I just wanted you to know that because I know that.
Maybe next
I knew you
time
were
we
concerned.
record, we should just record the entire session wearing face masks.
Ooh.
Just get a nice self-care face mask session.
Yeah,
in.
self-care. Kurt face mask. Man, my face has never been so soft.
I was an innovator. I was one of the first people with a face mask.
Were you?
Yeah, at Fred Meyer's.
Is that a COVID thing?
Yeah.
Oh.
It was.
Kurt's
we just went down a totally different road.
We're going too
we
dark.
did.
We're going too dark.
Yeah.
The dark web.
The dark web.
So Kurt, now you're what we call a client navigator or peer support.
Right.
So you took your experiences in, really your prescription-based addiction.
Right.
And it was kind of
dependency
like,
and addiction. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It became a lifestyle, and you shifted your lifestyle into this more of a beacon of somebody who's like, hey, I tried it a different way.
Right.
Be careful when you're trying it, right? We're not encouraging everyone to just stop meds today. Like, there's got to be a taper process, and you got to have people in place. But with your situation, it was different, right? Like you were in a situation where you're like, okay, this stuff actually isn't helping me anymore.
Right.
I feel worse.
Yeah.
So how can I be better? And you started making some lifestyle changes in your dietary stuff, your exercise, making your food at home probably helped a lot. And then, the people that you're spending your time with and you're giving your energy to became a really big factor in that. And
for sure.
That's really just a testament to your resiliency, man. And just the power that, that you have as a peer support is somebody who's like, look,
I did what the system told me to do, and it didn't work for me. So I had to find a back way to my recovery and my healing.
Right.
And that's just awesome, you know, Kurt. And, you know, whether we agree 100% on certain topics or not, you know, the fact is that's what's working for you.
Right.
And when you say individualized care, that's the most important piece is that your individualized care was not necessarily a chemical imbalance. It was a lifestyle that needed to change to build you that confidence in yourself. And so that when I ask people if they met Kurt Hoenack, you're willing to tell them, hi, I'm Kurt Hoenack, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I think that it's an awesome opportunity that we have here to just be able to dive into each other's lives and just share, you know, some of our truths. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be going in and talking to some really interesting people. We have an officer from Wasilla PD coming in, talking about some wellness checks. We have, we're going to be talking about some of the bills that are going up through the House and the Senate, that the SB 60 and SB 80. So check those out before we're going to
hold on to your seats, people. The letters and numbers are coming out. It's going to be
me and Kurt have a big argument. We have a big argument on our stands on those two bills because he's on one side and I'm on the other. It's really interesting. We both believe that there needs to be some care changes in the system, but I think we both have a different perspective, and that's the important thing. So thank you guys for tuning in to Diagnonsense. I'm Justin Pendergrass.
And I'm Kurt Hoenack.
Thank you guys. Until next time.